Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the bidders conference for the request for proposal for the Thrive by 5 book club. Immediately after we complete the bidders conference, we're going to proceed with the application training. I'll probably give you like a little 10-minute break for those of you who want to stay for the application training. And for those of you who do not want to stay, you're welcome to leave. Application training is a little bit more technical. The bidders conference sort of tells you what we're buying. Okay? And the application training tells you how to complete the application. It navigates you through the screens of the application. Okay? So it's always good, since we have a small group, to know who's in the room. So my name is Bevan Ritchie. I am one of the senior program managers here at the Children's Trust. And I'll sort of turn it over to the staff to introduce themselves who are here. And then we'll start in the front row and introduce all of you.
Hi, I'm Brian Mars. I'm a research analyst at the Children's Trust.
Kathy Dexter, Children's Trust.
Felix Becerra, Children's Trust.
I'm Lori Hanson, with the Children's Trust.
Okay, if we can start up here.
Good afternoon, Lita Parrish. I'm with Miami-Dade County Community Action and Services.
Hi, I'm Delia Lopez with Miami-Dade College, Miami Book Fair.
I'm Lisa Mendez, also with Miami-Dade College and Miami Book Fair.
I'm Kathy Marks from Brodart.
Armando Lanto, Augmented Intelligence Academy.
I'm sorry.
Augmented Intelligence Academy.
Delia Garcia, Independent Consultant.
Lisa Blair, Miami-Dade Family Learning Partnership.
Natalia Cat, Miami-Dade Family Learning Partnership.
All right, thank you. Okay, so we always start with telling you a little bit about Children's Trust and who we are. I think many of you know, but for those of you who don't know, I'm sharing with you the mission of the Children's Trust and the vision for you to read. We are our strategic plan, we operate under a strategic plan developed by our board, and it's grounded in these 4 foundations. And this program falls within one of the 4 foundations. And if you want more information about the Children's Trust, you can go to our website and learn all that we do and all the investments that we partner with the communities to be involved in. So I'm going to share with you trying to stay for recording. We're recording this, so I have to stay close so I can see what's on the board. So the Thrive by 5 Book Club implementation vendors. This is the RFP that's before you. And what is the Thrive by 5 Book Club? It's a solicitation that will fund 1 or more vendors to implement the Children's Trust Thrive by 5 Book Club. So what's included in that book club? It's a monthly mailing to young children birth to 5. And we previously we currently have an existing book club called the Read to Learn book club. It currently only serves 3-year-olds, and it's limited to a 1-year enrollment. And this new expanded version of the book club includes a birth to 5, offering potentially services prenatally up until 60th month of a child's birthday when they turn 5. Within the expansion of the existing book club, we also served families prenatally through, at birth through our new parent package. Some of you might be familiar with that. The new parent package gave out a book when the child was born in the hospital. We worked with 13 birthing hospitals and provided that service. So this is sort of a expansion of those 2 programs. Okay. The current contract for the existing provider for the book club will expire on the 31st of July, 2019. And this RFP includes an opportunity for, if needed, a 6-month sort of grace period to shift from one model to the next, and if needed. Okay. It's important to note that in order to get kids enrolled in registration, you have to have a method, a system to do so. So a big part of this is the data system, the enrollment and registration system that the parents will enroll the youth in. And there's separate information specific to how the registration will be used. We use it as a data collection as well as a system to sort of monitor, run reports, and sort of forecasts. It is currently under redevelopment, and a part of what anyone who's successful in applying, the vendors that are selected, their role would be to be involved in that sort of redesign or redevelopment of that system. There are 3 components of the system. Content development and book buying, that's one component. Professional fulfillment services, and ongoing operations and marketing. The marketing services are going to be procured separately through our vendor pool that we are currently in the process of finalizing, our communications vendor pool. That entity will work in collaboration with the Children's Trust and the operations vendor to market the program. Total available funding for this RFP is up to $1 million. Previously, for the current book club, we have $350,000 as the annual investment. The initial contract is for 14 months, beginning August 1st through September 30th, 2020. As a part of, and renewals will be for 4 additional 12-month renewals. So who are we targeting with this book club? It's open to all Miami-Dade County infants and young children from birth to 5. This is the expansion piece of the book club. It can be open prenatally, as I mentioned before, meaning you can an applicant potentially can propose something before the child is born. So it supports early learning, early brain development. There's the potential to address the disparities that come from possibly poverty, not having access to quality early learning environments. And one of the things that we thought that was really important, though it's open to all infants, toddlers, preschoolers up to age 5 in Miami-Dade County, we've included 11 target zip codes. We looked at analysis of 4 risk factors and used that to determine that there are 11 high need, zip codes that it's necessary to focus on. We talk a little bit about in the RFP about the current enrollment and how the current program has targeted high-need communities, and we want that to continue to be a priority within this RFP. So I'm going to go through the, tell you a little bit about applying for the implementation components. An applicant or a vendor can apply for one or more of the components. Later on, Brian, during the application process, will tell you when you're completing for each one. If you apply for one or more, it's a separate application. So if you want to do 3, if you want to apply for 2, it would be 2 separate applications if you're doing 2, and or 3 separate applications if you're doing 3 of the components. Okay. We also, throughout this application, talk about coordination expectation, because there is a lot of, there are 3 components, and because there's sort of interdependency and dependency with each of the components, there's going to be a need for ongoing coordination. For the Children's Trust, when we talk about the marketing component, there's a need for ongoing coordination there. When if you are the component that is doing the ongoing operations, and you need to communicate with your expectation with the vendor that's buying the books and developing the coordination, the content, it's important that there's always that ongoing coordination. So the components have to work together collectively to be effective. So there is an expectation that it's not a standalone component. We collectively have to work together to make this the most effective book club. And leverage funding, we note in the RFP that if you can bring match dollars or leverage dollars to the table, and the expectation is that we as a Children's Trust are also going to be looking at partnerships and opportunities to bring additional dollars. As noted, the $1 million, if we move to full, or when we move to full implementation or full reaching the full potential within Miami-Dade County, that $1 million probably will not take us to serving all eligible children in Miami-Dade County. So the expectation is that we will have to do some seeking other funding to support this. So if some of that could come through your application, it will be looked upon favorably as we review these applications. Okay. So the first component is the content development book buying vendor entity. This vendor will be selecting and developing the books that are developmentally appropriate from birth through age 5. We currently have, through the existing book club, we currently have the 3-year-old, and within the RFP shows you the link to access that information to see what that looks like. The expectation in developing this appropriate books, it will be available in English and Spanish, and where available, it would be, if possible, also have it in Haitian Creole. Currently, and the expectation is that parents should have the choice, or caregivers should have the choice with the opportunity to have the books in Creole or a package of books available to them in Creole. Okay. Included in the content development book buying vendor component is the development of high quality collateral materials. So these are sort of parent resources, parent guides that support the book, supports engagement with the caregiver and the child. The format of this content, it should be engaging and diverse, including print and electronic and possibly other multimedia methods. We also note that as a part of this, it should be inclusive of families with children with disabilities, right? So having the ability to address those that might be hearing or visually impaired, that should be a part of the application to address how you would support and serve families that might be hearing or visually impaired. The second part of this area is ongoing purchase of selected books. So this entity that's developing the content will be purchasing the books, and in purchasing them, they're going to store the books and have them available for, this is where the communication and the coordination comes in, to meet the expectation of enrollment. So the communication between the content development, book buying, and the operations arm is very critical to the success of this. It's necessary. As a part of the application, and Brian will go into a little bit more detail about that, in the implementation plan and the timeline, you're going to discuss your rationale and your reasoning for selecting the books that will, and the content that's going to be a part of the book club. So professional fulfillment services, this one is pretty straightforward. It's the book club packaging, receiving, processing, and delivery services. This is the entity that will be mailing the books to the children. Included in this area is the storage of materials, and we included some, based on our current content and what we deliver, we've included some weights and information about what our current packages look, so that you have an idea of what potentially can be mailed out. We expect that you utilize the lowest costs around bulk mailing to do this, because again, we're trying to reach eventually trying to reach all the eligible children in 5 in Miami-Dade County. So the ability to do so and would be dependent on if we can have some cost savings around the mailing of these packages. And the third available vendor component is the ongoing operations. And the operations and coordination with the trust and other vendors, as I mentioned prior, communication, coordination is really important. This entity will be the lead in communicating the needs around enrollment. And it's one of the first key and critical components is around transition. So transition from the existing model, which is a 3-year-old book model, to the new model. We listed in the RFP that, and as I shared, there's a 6-month transition period as needed, but during that time, we're going to talk about the expectations. This applicant will discuss how you will transition from the existing model to the new model to reach the soft launch that we that we have that will occur on or before December of 2019. Okay. As we mentioned, the marketing and outreach aspect of the program will be coordinated with this entity as well. And the fact that we are going to procure that elsewhere, this is where, again, the coordination comes into play. The ongoing operations vendor will work collaboratively with the Children's Trust and the selected marketing arm or arms, meaning we may have more than one vendor that is doing the marketing. And in addition to the marketing, customer relations is a critical component of this, connecting with the customers around membership, registration, around feedback. It's the other critical component of the ongoing operations vendor. Technology and data management and registration system, as I mentioned before, our system is ongoing in development. And it's important that this entity be at the table as we look at what the system needs to do, where the system can improve to achieve the goals and the outcomes of this book club. Included in the ongoing operations vendors scope of responsibility is also program evaluation. So this includes the ongoing data management and formative evaluation. You're going to utilize feedback. There's expectations around parent surveys and other information and data that can be collected through the system to talk about either quality improvement or the success of the book club. Okay, and what are we going to be measuring? So it's what we typically do is we look at quality measures, quantity measures, and outcome measures. And each of the vendors will have measures as appropriate. We listed some in the RFP around numbers and outcomes we expect to achieve. So, with that, I'm going to talk a little bit about the timeline. Okay, so we released the opportunity on March 27, and we're under the cone of silence. That means there are only, as noted in the RFP, certain acceptable methods of communication. One being this, the vendors conference and the application training. And later on, I'll talk to you a little bit about where you can use additional methods to communicate with the staff of the Children's Trust around this RFP. The one notable deadline is the due date, which is May 6, 2019. There are some other important due dates around questions and the process for review that are in the application, in the RFP. So please note those. Included, and we'll talk a little bit about this later, is the period for the application review. This will go to the board for recommendation. We'll make award recommendations in June, and it'll go to the board in July, and the contract will start in August. So, one thing I do want to note that this RFP is a little bit different, and because it's a vendor, so we do not have the requirement for the fiscal audit. you just have to follow the other ones. Governmental entities are prohibited from contracting directly with Miami-Dade County School, and you must be a vendor that can operate in the state of Florida and registered with the Florida Division of Corporations, Sundays. Okay, and as a reminder, our services are limited to Miami-Dade County. Okay, so how can you access the grant? I'm pretty sure those of you who are here already know that because you got to the grant. This grant is under our procurement page. You can still access it from the grants page, but the link is under Children's Trust, and you go to About Us, and the procurement place lists this RFP. So that's another way that you can get to this application. The second way is you could go to grants. Within the grants page, there is also a link to the procurement page. All right.
Tell you what
the
grant revenue.
Right, so there it is, okay? Those are these are the procurement page. Click here to apply, and they're the important due dates. Start a new application, the opportunity to ask questions, and the opportunity to download the RFP. See your application, timeline, and I want to call your attention, there's a lot of resources that were listed in the RFP. It's going to be very helpful if you review that information so that you are fully informed about what's existing, how we got here, and sort of references for your application. Okay. So you have the opportunity to ask questions in 3 categories: general, services, or and fiscal questions. Right? These are services. Traditionally, the general questions are the ones about process, about the RFP itself, and then the services are about what we're asking for within, and then there might be fiscal questions that are related to budget. In the past, fiscal questions have been related to the audit, but that's not a part of this. Okay, and it's the same through the ask the questions. We ask that you put the RFP number that you're applying for when you're asking the question. And for technical questions, you send the questions to the help desk at thechildrenstrust.org. Okay? So, sorry, go back. So, it's important for you to thoroughly review all the RFP content. What I provided was an overview, and you have the opportunity to ask questions. You need to create your account and authorize who you want to be a part of that application. You're participating, hopefully you'll be participating in the application training that's immediately following this. And then you're going to check our website regularly. We respond to questions that are posed weekly. There might sometimes be addendums. We post a debriefing schedule and those that. So it's important that even though you download the application, the RFP, and you started your application and you've attended here, there might be updates after this meeting. So just stay tuned to the website, just check it regularly, okay? So that concludes the bidders conference, and you have the opportunity to ask.
You mentioned that, there would be storage related to the professional fulfillment section, but then also storage related to the content development book buying. Do you mean storage of the actual books, or how do you guys see that?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
You mentioned that the storage of the books, from the content development book buying section to the professional fulfillment section. How do you guys see that being transferred as complete packages already going to the professional fulfillment vendor, or as just the books and the guides going separately?
I think that we envision the storage costs being primarily in the fulfillment quote. So the procurement should have the books shipped to the place. Part of the fulfillment work is putting the packages together.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Any other questions?
In terms of the shipping, is it the vision that, or with the program now with the 3-year-olds, just each child, how do they acquire the books? The books are mailed to their home,
Yeah,
or?
to their home. They register and they provide an address where the information is made, where the book content, the package.
I have a quick additional question. The technology part of it, technology and data management, I believe, if I'm not incorrect, that the trust is right now the developer of that system, or your vendor and stuff. Is that going to stay within the trust, or whoever's in charge of ongoing operations going to have to also have a technology expert on board, or a technology subcontractor?
The trust will continue to house the system. We are probably changing the vendor from, which, whatever, it's a back-end thing, but when we're redeveloping, we're gonna be developing it in Trust Central, which is, this whole system that has all of our solicitation and procurement and contracting pieces to it. So we're kind of moving it out of the website where it sits now and into a more robust participant data tracking system. But the trust will continue to maintain that reporting system, linked through our website and in our Trust Central. So what we need from the vendors is input on like user needs and feedback and what development options need to be built into the system to automate as much as possible, to use, actionable intelligence to know how to manage to use like API enrollments, to be able to enroll more efficiently, larger numbers of people. So there's a lot of functionality that we don't have now that we plan to build into the new system, but we need kind of the input from the user point of view and the operational work of the book club to inform that development.
Okay, but the technology vendor would still be on the trust dime
Yes.
rather than on the vendor
Yes.
dime. Okay.
Correct.
Who approves the book content? How do you know the book content is the right book content?
So we're relying on the expertise of the vendor who's going to be proposing. So a part of, there are questions within the RFP that this application will be
Done to get 5 years worth of monthly books selected. So what we want to see in a proposal would be the qualifications, the expertise, the background, which requires some knowledge of child development. It also requires knowledge of the children's literature field, right? The publishing field. So we're looking for that expertise, and then we're looking for you to describe the approach that you would take to identify all those books that are going to need to be identified and purchased, right? And then the selected vendor would then start that work in August when the award begins.
Do you currently have a database of mailing addresses for parents, or that will start from scratch?
there is an existing, I think our current enrollment is about 3,800. And within there, the expectation is the vendor who is going to be the ongoing operational vendor, a key part of what they're doing in the transition plan is to make sure that the children that are in our system receiving books, that they will continue to receive the books on whatever, wherever they are in their 1-year enrollment. So they will continue and have the opportunity to move them to the new book club.
And,
Just a clarification, because you mentioned earlier when you were presenting that there might be services prenatal. And I just want to ensure that I'm clear about that, because the proposal says that sign-up can happen prenatal, the RFP, that sign-up can happen prenatally, and that this solicitation will replace the new birth packets. So I wanted to clarify what is the expectation.
So the opportunity to potentially, and I don't want to propose a service, but the opportunity to do some sort of welcome package is something that could be considered, because I think in the we put that there's an opportunity for up to 61 books. So we engage individuals at birth, so around women who are just about to give birth. That's where we engage families when they're in the hospital, right when they're giving birth. So enrollment prenatally, opportunity to do something that's a welcome package. I'm not prescribing that you propose that. I'm just saying that that potentially is an opportunity.
I just wanted some clarity. Out of the 3 components, you said each one requires its own
Application, yeah, because there are different questions that are asked within the application. And during the application training, Brian will share with you, will walk you through the application.
Thank you.
And in the ongoing, I'm sorry, raise my hands. Okay. In the ongoing operations under marketing and outreach, the marketing company is gonna be retained by the trust.
Mm-hmm.
So, and outreach, so does that mean that whoever, gets this particular piece of the RFP would not have to hire or contract, like an independent outreach team? Or, I don't know how much you guys can elaborate on how that would work.
Yeah, I think outreach is an allowable activity within. We're just saying that we're going to I don't want to say dictate, but coordinate the outreach efforts in collaboration with the vendor around marketing. I think it's appropriate when you're targeting communities to have outreach opportunities within the organization. But all of that should be part of a holistic plan of doing this, and it should be a part of the whole marketing plan.
So just to tag on to that, I think our expectation is that the vendor from the communications vendor pool, one of the first things that they would do is to put together a marketing plan, a comprehensive marketing plan. And that plan would have different strategies, right, that might be implemented by different people, by different entities, right? Some of the strategies, if it's a media buy, maybe stay centralized with that marketing vendor because they're bulk purchasing other things that the trust purchases. But some other, like more on the ground, out specific things that are outreach oriented, may be done by the ongoing operations vendor, but the idea is that we first need to have that plan that's comprehensive in nature, that specifies the outcome targets that we want to achieve, that has the evaluation steps in it of how we're going to be able to assess whether we're hitting those marks or not, and then specifies like what the strategies are and who's responsible for what. So we really think that's an important piece that we need to put in place. It's just that the timing of the vendor pool is coming in May to the board, And so then we will have the opportunity, hopefully, to line that up once, this comes in and the vendor pool is ready to start off with a
And that would-
comprehensive plan.
And that would be part of the first 6 months of ramp up?
Yes.
So if I may, if the funding is $1 million, and you're, have currently a database of 3,000 plus mailing lists of, what is your expectation? You see, triple that, 9,000 mailing addresses?
On page, help me here. Page two, yeah, page 2 of the RFP, we have our membership projections. So in 5 years, we want to reach 60% of the birth to 5 population, that would be 90,000 children. That's why we need more than $1 million to make that happen. So in the first year, we're saying we'd like to grow it to 18,000. That would be about 12% of the birth to 5-year-olds. So if you read the
12% of the births occurring in Miami-Dade County, you want to reach 16% of that
60
at the 5 years.
at the 5-year mark.
No, but in the first year.
In the first year, what we did was we just made a straight projection.
Oh.
From today to 60% at the end, on ballpark estimates, right? It's not an exact. We're estimating about 150,000 kids, about 30,000 kids per year of age, right? And so we just did a straight line membership growth. It might be that you could ramp up faster if you get some automated things in place with major system enrollments. Might be good, the ramp up needs to be slower and catch up later. That's part of what you need to tell us. What's the path? What's the implementation plan to achieve those membership growth projections?
And what is your expectation with that $1 million going from 3,000 mailing addresses that you got right now, meaning?
Well,
children,
to
how
be
many?
clear, we have more than 3,000. We have 3,800 that are active 3-year-olds right now. So we've been operating the book club for 7 years. So we have some kids who are already too old, but we probably have some kids who aged out of our 3-year-old book club, but they're still not 5 yet. So those kids could be swept back in. And then we have some kids who have signed up for the 3-year-old book club but haven't started getting the books yet because they're not 3 yet. They've signed up at 1 or 2. So we have more addresses than the 3,800. That's our active membership of 3-year-olds. But that should not be the main thing to rely upon. As described in the ongoing operations section, it talks about strategic partnerships with systems that interact with pregnant women and young children. Those are the systems. The birthing hospitals, you need to be there at the bedside signing up everybody. So we need those partnerships to get the largest groups of people in at the lowest effort, right? And so that's where we're looking for ideas on how we're going to make that happen. But we know to get to the 5-year mark, we're going to need probably at least double the $1 million to be able to make it.
I have a question in reference to the actual packages that will be delivered to the child. I understand it's in an envelope and there's a book, but in addition to that, there will be supplemental material. And in the past, I know that there's been like a sheet,
A parent guide.
And something that the Children's Trust actually created, like newsletters. Would that still be part of the package so that we can estimate the cost correctly?
I'm sorry, I missed the last part of what
The
you said.
newsletter.
There was a newsletter along with the supplemental material and a book that was sent to the child. Just wanted to make sure I understand what the expectation is in terms of pieces that will be mailed every month to every child.
Yeah, so I'll let you chime in, Lori, after. So what we shared was what was currently being offered. We also talked about for the supplemental or the collateral, that you could choose to do it in various different ways. So it doesn't necessarily have to be within the packet that the collateral material is included. For a parent, it might, if you could propose that. Again, this is someplace we're relying on your expertise and your understanding of what works with parents to engage, because the purpose is we want the opportunity to engage with the book and the child in some level of reading. There are some parents that don't have an understanding of the written word, and there might be opportunities to share with them how to use the book in different ways when you don't, you're not a reader, if you will. So I don't think we particularly say that it has to be, but we say you have the option to provide in different formats.
Yeah, I would just echo what Yvonne said, which is we're not predefining the packet. Part of what we want to see in the proposals is, what kind of content is proposed. We want to look at what formats. Yes, we probably want to have something in print, but could there be electronic and multimedia formats also associated? Could there be, other types of things included? We're looking for experts, in the content area to propose a strategy for that.
Just to follow up on her question, because parts of that may need to be in line with the new system if we want to propose some electronic materials or e-materials, so if the system is going to have the capability of mass mailing via email, text, okay. Yeah, because that will help in whatever gets proposed, if that's going to be part of it.
Yeah, sort of a notification function.
Yes.
Okay.
And I have two questions, I'll ask them separately. The first one is, I noticed on page 4, it describes 12 board books. So are you assuming that that's just for the first year, and the toddlers are going to get a paperback book? Is that what the expectation is for year 2? So I guess the first 12 months are going to get a board book, and then are you recommending the toddlers get paperback? Is that, because I'm just looking 49 paperback and 12 board books. So that's my first question. And then the second question, we understand the solicitation is for $1 million for 3 components. Do you have any ideas on the breakdown of that $1 million, of what's allocated in between all 3, or you have no idea?
Yeah, we do not. We're looking to the proposals internally when we receive proposal. Part of what we do is, and that's part of the application training, we do some internal review, looking at each component and discussing recommendations. So we're going to look at this as a collective. We're not going to look at any proposals that are recommended or viable for funding in isolation when we make funding decisions. And I think we provided an estimate based on what we know about what we've done in the past for the new parent package, and what we currently do for the paperback books.
It will be important in the implementation plan description section that you talk about a multi-year plan. Because I would guess we're not going to spend $1 million in the first year. I just guess that. Because we have some months of planning where you're just picking the books and designing the materials. We're not going to have, a kabillion new members yet. So I think that you need to really describe your projection of how you think the growth is going to go, what are the main activities that are going to happen in the first year, and the second year, and the third year, up to a 5-year plan, and what do you think those cost projections look like? Right now, we have authorization for $1 million a year. But we're looking at how do we leverage other funding partners to the table? How do we get the business community to invest in this? We're looking for leveraging funding from you all as applicants. And, you know, and then we maybe can also make the argument to grow the trust investment over the years. But right now, we're jumping already from $350,000 to $1 million. So we need to be able to show how we can use that appropriately and what does the growth projection look like in terms of what we need in the future for future resources.
Okay, there's no more questions. That concludes the bidders conference section. We're gonna take about 5 minutes and then we'll proceed to walking you through the application. We're gonna go ahead and get started. And I'm glad you all stayed with us. So we're going to move into the application training portion of this event. So welcome back. So I'm going to just, I guess, reorient you. I'll be very brief since it's all of you who stayed. And talk about the RFP a little bit and the review process. Then after that, you have the opportunity to ask questions. And then we'll go into the live demonstration, And then after the demonstration, you'll have the opportunity to ask questions, and then we'll just wrap it up and talk to you about what you need to do to move forward with your next steps. Okay, so clarifying questions, we have 2 opportunities, as I said, and then when you want to ask additional questions, you can do that online. And again, technical questions are through our help desk. Those are like system if you're having trouble with something. Okay. So great news. This application is much simpler than some of our previous applications with mainly just 2 sections, okay, within the application. So the first part of the application, as was mentioned prior, qualifications, your expertise, your experience, that about delivering a particular a service, what skill set you have. That's what you're going to talk a little bit about in the first section of the application. It includes your implementation plan. You're going to talk about what approach you're going to take. You're going to talk about timeline. We're talking about, the timeline talks about multiple year implementation. And you're also going to talk about how will you measure your success in the program. So the key performance metrics. That's the basis of the first section. And then the second section is the budget and the estimated costs, including unit costs. And there are 2 budgets. There are the 12-month budget and the first year, the initial budget, which is the 14-month budget. Okay, so that's the gist of the RFP section. So we are using our standard application rating that ranges from a score of 1, which is an unacceptable response, to a score of 4, which is an excellent response, right? A good response means that the application is mainly complete and might have minor deficiency. An excellent response is an application that exceeds what we may have requested or asked for in the RFP. And then these are the section weights of the RFP. Know that within the RFP, not every question that's asked is applicable to every component of the RFP, but we are using a standard scale, and we're using a standard rates throughout the entire application, right? So somebody who might be applying for fulfillment may not have all the same questions applicable to someone who might be applying for the ongoing operations, right? So there are slight variations, and you'll learn a little bit more about that as you read through the application or as we discuss it here today. So our application review process is we utilize a team of 3. It is typically 2 internal trust staff and a volunteer reviewer. We use community volunteer reviewers, and we're using people that have expertise or understanding of these components that we're procuring for. Through that process, those are done independently. We come to a group debriefing where we can collectively discuss our independent review. This is a public meeting. During the meeting, vendors can participate, but their participation is a silent participation. You can come and attend, but there isn't an opportunity to speak. We have another process for that, which is if after we've done a debriefing meeting, and we've got our final application review from the debriefing meeting, we identify those applicants that are viable, and through that, after that process, that's an internal process within the Children's Trust, we interview or on some occasions do site visits. More than likely, it's oftentimes an interview for this type of RFP. You will be invited if you are identified, if the vendor is identified as a viable applicant through Trust Central notification. So look out for that. And then we do an initiative review. And there was a question about how do we take all of that into consideration around funding, what you're bringing to the table, and we look at it as a collective to make funding recommendations. Okay. Any questions about our process? Okay.
With the interview, with the book provider would come in person to meet with you all based on the, if they were viable based on the score. Do you have any idea what date that is?
I think we put in the timeline.
Okay.
And then we are still in front of me. We have our current dates, and we always say those are subject to change, but that's why I asked you to keep an eye just in case. But they are listed the time period. Okay. So we're going to move to the demo.
I have a question, and I don't know if you will answer it or if it's part of this, so I will ask my question just in case. The key performance metrics that are listed here as sample, some metrics will apply depending on the on whatever section gets selected. Is that correct, or is it going to be like a drop-down that you select, the ones that apply depending on content or fulfillment or operations, or how does that work?
What's listed in the RFP are only samples.
Exactly.
So there's no drop down, you fill in your own key performance metrics. They
Gotcha.
should be appropriate to each
So depending on the area, that's
Yeah.
okay, that was my question.
So we choose which ones are appropriate.
Yes, okay,
or add.
Right.
correct.
That's what we wanted to just teach.
Okay, so to get to the application itself, Yvonne showed 2 ways to do it. The simplest way is to go to our website, childrenstrust.org, go hover over about us and click procurement. That will take you to this page, and you will then select the Thrive by 5 book club. This is also where we post the review schedule and other resources. So you click here to apply. That will take you, this pop-up will show up, click OK, and then it'll take you onto the Trust Central system. I don't know why it took you there. Yeah, there it is. Okay, so it should take you to this page. So this is a page that we want to show it in the PowerPoint. At the top is the RFP name. Below that is start an application. That's where you start an application. Ask a question where you ask questions, and you can download the PDF, the RFP as a PDF. As you create your applications will show below the MAC applications. It could be 1, 2, or 3. This is a timeline that Govan mentioned before. These are all the dates that we listed publicly. The site visit interview period is also on here, so you can take note of that. And on the right side are all the resources. We will probably be adding resources such as the VAERS conference and application training video, and any other resources that we add throughout the process. At the bottom of the screen is where the questions and answers will be. So all questions will be shown publicly as well as answers. Okay, so to start an application, I should also mention that on the right side of the screen, they'll show the time remaining until the application is due, and as well as the due date, and that is Eastern Standard Time. So you click start an application. It will either tell you if you're an existing user to our Trust Central system, you sign in, or you can create a new user. So I'm going to put one. So it should take you now to the first page, the pre-application. This is where you would input your information, your agency information. If your agency is not listed in the dropdown and you click agency not listed, it will give you more fields, including your SunBiz number or your EIN number, or your EIN. If when you put in your EIN it doesn't validate it, you should send a email to the help desk at thechildrenstrust.org, including the information listed here, and we will add it to the list. So once you select, you fill out all that.
Will it let you select a state other than Florida?
As long as you have an EIN number, you should be able to apply.
Okay.
But you have to have an EIN too. So then you go on to title your application. We suggest that you title your application with your company name, followed by the area you're applying to, the component you're applying to, just so it's an easier way to track which application you're submitting. Authorized users are all the users within that organization that has access to the application. All you need is their first or last name and an email address. And then at the bottom, the service area is in the implementation component that you're going to apply for. So drop down the 3 implementation areas. So here you would select one and you can proceed. If you're applying for another component, when you come back, only the other 2 will show up. So you won't have an opportunity to apply for the same component twice. So then you hit proceed and it will take you to this page, right? So we're not going to actually create an application. We're going to show you an example we did. So it'll take you to this page, which shows on the right-hand side the 4 sections in the application. If you download the PDF, these are the sections that show up on there. At the top of each section is content that you'll see in the PDF, the core content. And for example, the introduction has all the text there. It also has links that when you click, you can open up that content. So when you scroll to the bottom, to the actual question, the question implementation component, this will populate with whatever component you selected in the pre-application. So we selected professional fulfillment services in the pre-application. You only see this here, and you will select that. That way you can also keep track of which one you're applying to, in case you create more than one and you don't remember what you applied for. When whichever section is complete, at the bottom you want to mark the section completed. That way, if you do that, you click next. On the right-hand side, it will show you that that section is complete. If you don't hit that, if you don't click that, then it won't show the check mark, and you have to go back and complete it. At any point, if you don't have to complete this in one sitting, if you want to come back, all you do is you click details on the top. It will take you to a summary of what you've applied for, and you can go back in whenever you have an opportunity to. So when you go back in here, you can click modify. That is how you modify your application. So we'll go back in. Okay. So the introduction to the first section, that's where you click the component you selected. The next section is the qualifications, experience, and business process, which has 3 questions: the qualification, staffing, and experience, the implementation plan and the timeline, and the key performance metrics. So all 3 of them have the instructions for each question, and it's an open text field with a maximum word limit of 3,000 words. We also have a lot of functionality that Microsoft Word has. So you can create a table, you can add a picture if you want to. Everything counts towards the word limit, so I will be mindful of that. Okay, and then we have the supporting documents upload feature, so you can upload any documents related to these 3 questions. So if you try to hit mark section completed, but you have not entered a response to any question, it'll give you an error message and saying that you have to complete a response to that question. So it won't let you hit that unless, it won't click that unless you've completed each question. You can move between sections without completing that. So if you don't click mark the section completed, you want to go to a different section, you can do that, and it'll let you do that. But to complete the application, you have to respond to every single question. So we're going to go back and just put it. The next section is budget and estimated costs. You want to add something? Okay. So this is where you input the 14th month initial startup budget. So there's a field for personnel allocation, for operating costs, and for administrative costs. Each of them have instructions above each question. And it's also, in the PDF, you also see these questions, the instructions. So these are all number currency fields. So let's say we put 100,000 for each one. The 4th field, the total 14-month initial funding request, is a calculation of the 3 previous fields. So if you change one of them, it will change the amount in that field. And then we have below that, it's a 14-month matching funds, and that field's not calculated to anything else, but would have to respond to it. The same thing for the 12-month personal allocation, operating costs, and administrative costs. They will add up into the 12-month annual funding request amount. There is a open text field at the bottom for budget and unit cost explanation. It also has 3,000 word limit and has instructions at the top of the question. So.
And in the budget narrative, though the fields are text fields, we're asking that you know, when you're using your operations costs, so follow along with the categories that are in the budget guideline, so that you can refer to if there's any limitations, or so that we can have a little bit of detail in the budget narrative about what are your operational costs and what are your staffing costs.
We also have a supplemental documentation upload button, which you can upload any type and stitch. So the last section, application review process, review guidelines and certifications. The content here will go over the review criteria, the weighting, And it will also give you the questions that we've put for every single section. So these are the reviewer questions that the reviewers will base their review on. I would follow them probably. And then at the bottom, it's the some questions, certification questions that you have to complete before you submit the application. So let's do this. If you answer yes to any of the questions, you'll get a text field that will show up where you have to expand on why you put yes. So once you mark all the sections complete and you hit save and close, it will take you to this page where at the top it says submit application. You should only submit the application when you're 100% ready to do that. If you hit submit application and you want to go back and edit it, you cannot do that. Once it's submitted in our system, that's it. So if you accidentally click over submit application, it will give you a pop-up where you have to click OK to make sure you actually want to submit. So, do that. Once you do that, you should get an email confirming that you applied, and then you can have a review right here of what you applied for. You cannot, however, go back into it once you've submitted it. So that's pretty much it. Question? Yeah.
Is there a point where you put all this in and someone else can overlook look at what you put in and edit a couple of different folks or?
So the authorized users, so at the beginning when you're doing the pre-application, you can add authorized users.
Okay.
If you only add yourself and you want to add others to it, you go to this screen is your main application screen. You just go to authorized users, you click the pencil,
and then you can add them.
And then you can add whoever to that, and they can go and review what you put.
So you just put everything in there, but you don't hit submit.
Yes. Okay. Until you hit submit, also it won't be submitted. So you have to
save it.
It will save it, yes.
Can you print your application once you enter everything? Can you
Yes.
printer front? Okay.
You go to this field, you click printer friendly, and that's where you can print out the application. So it'll show something like this. Very good. Yeah.
The questions, and again, our timeline to May 6th. Okay, process. Again, how to ask questions, Brian went over that, same question. And your technical question. Opportunity, and again, make the RFP, register in Trust Central where the application is, sign your users, complete all sections, check the Q&A because there might be some supplemental or some clarifying information in there, and just submit by May 6th. And best of luck. Thank you. That concludes our application training.